the enfleshment of eschatology. Against which the arts of earthly joy had been springing from the judgment ground, preparing for the Western incarnation's second phase. Though in this 13th century mirror case of the Castle of Love, as in the music of triple runs hung over bare fifth loyalty, this motet, based on Adam de la Halle's Robin Loves Me, Robin Has Me, in these, as in the acausalities of dream romance, delight is as brittle, as thin, as its spatial rendering. In the museum and concert hall without walls, moments, the dawn birth of 1400, are always ours, as the dream lovers in May of the Très Riche Earls and to Binchois de plus en plus issue from the castle through a little wood into a hawthorn-flowered space, which first gives them ground to think their pleasures real. Charles d'Orléans. Summer's harbingers have come. Les fourrières d'Este sont venues pour appareiller son logis, et ont fait tendre ses tapis de fleurs et de verdure tissus. "100 years and even myth, Titian's Bacchanal of Andros stakes out a summer shore for the rapt enfleshment of the dance of wine and love. That dynamic of sense, as in the Ricercares of Willaert, is a battle call which turns the 16th century to a field of moral war." By the Cartesian 17th, Rubens complements enfleshed apocalypse with a life rapture where chivalric dream and pagan myth lift this moated castle, the artist, his wife, and guests on a validating wave of present good. Like Royalist England, William Law's, Johnson's, Penshurst, thou hast thy walks for health as well as sport, thy mount to which the Dryads do resort, where Pan and Bacchus their high feasts have made, beneath the broad beech and the chestnut shade. Herrick's, come, my Corinna, come, let's go a-maying. See how Aurora throws her fair, fresh quilted colors through the air. Get up, sweet slug a-bed, and see the dew bespangling herb and tree. That may have been the prime of the European fruitful earth. Since by the 18th century of Gainsborough fielding this on, transport of possessing, though the glorious revolution, Locke, and common law have laid a firmer base, both in philosophy and custom, for the freehold pride of cornucopian ground, the skeptic edge of enlightenment already undercuts the Lord and Lady Booby of the sunlit heritage. with Moritz von Schwind's mid-19th century waking, as in those tearful meltings into the major, which Schubert taught Schumann, Liszt this Brahms, the wedding of expected joy has been overextended. So parents used to say when children could not stop giggling, your tickling string is hanging out and it's going to get stepped on. By the end of the century, the overstretching breaks in Nietzschean scorn. Thus, from Brahms to Mahler, is Toulouse-Lautrec's Messaline named for the silk or for Emperor Claudius' cruel profligate? Or is it exactly the silken opulence centuries had been in search of, which stirs this consciously late Roman surfeit of flesh and venom of soul? As in Pound's blast, they howl, they complain that the twitching of 3 abdominal nerves is incapable of producing a lasting nirvana. If the earth titan for whom Mahler named the first symphony is the alienation of that God who took on time and flesh, what resurrection his title for the second was at hand. So far we have felt out the dual incarnation of the whole. In that continuum, we have now to trace and name the century-by-century changes of the style moon. First, we lay it down as if it were true, though birth was stirring even there, the stripped negation of the Dark Age ground. Dogmatic reduction, we say, has become with the Christianized tribes of the North the automatic home, this jeweled reliquary of Sainte Foy, throned over the mortal shroud. As shoots of Romanesque Gothic spring from that ground, they work in creative tension with its otherworldly creed. Year by year, the bare field of damnation and prayer gathers more of earth's compromising life. Nicholas of Verdun's 1180 resurrection raises God into time. So scholasticism reshapes the faith it acclaims, planting reason in Tertullian's paradox, incarnation sure because impossible. Reason, like digestion, can dissolve its own frame. So with the speculation of the Greeks, but medieval question begins and ends in dogma. It is the protection of the transrational fabric from the energy to be released there, which makes possible the giant constructions of Gothic and Renaissance, a dialectical buttressing of which the cathedral is an outward sign. Consider Laon, with Thomas Aquinas' triple vaultings over the insoluble One, as Father, Word, and Spirit, both changeless and active in the world. It would seem there cannot be any procession in God, for procession signifies outward movement, but in God there is nothing subject to motion, no diversity. On the contrary, Christ says, "From God I proceeded." I answer, as outward procession to external matter, inward procession to the intelligible Word, one with the source whence he proceeds. It would seem that procession cannot be called generation. On the contrary, it is said, "This day have I begotten thee." I answer, not generation from non-being to being, but the origin of a living being from a conjoined living principle, as a man proceeds from a man. But procession does not end with the word. There is another of the Spirit, called the procession of love. Lest we slide to a pantheism of infinite processions, I answer, divine processions can be derived only from actions which remain in the agent, one with his essence. Relations to creatures are not real in him. Creation thus withering like a pricked balloon, what then of God's body? A divine person signifies a relation as subsisting. Numerical terms denote in God a transcendental multitude. Sursum corda, the Greek one many, has been seated in spirit. In such fiats of daring, the organum of Perotin vaults over modal Gregorian, pillared on the transhuman perfection of bare chords. Everywhere temporality is trained on the mystical. The civic and national work in the hierarchies of chivalry and church, as these Reims crusaders receive the symbolic host of earthly vanity and divine reward. Even the prescience of Bacon takes the cover of scholastic authority. Goliard poetry flowers in the monastic garden. Summaris Ecumenian, lively and cunning canon, has alternate words of pious Latin. How sprightly to lute, pipe, and viol, the Worcester Alleluia Psalat. Sacred manuscripts, the cathedrals themselves break into marginalia of fighting, drinking, and love, while the secularized drama issuing from the church doors fills the holy ground with juggling and profane farce. That these sports can be embraced on a Psalter's Beatus page, as the tumbler in the French Miracle devotes his dance to Our Lady, allows them a freedom from responsibility which after the Renaissance they could never claim, while their doubtful charter comments here on the fall and the drunkenness of Noah, sharpens their joy, heightening everywhere the plangent clash of Gothic. Meanwhile, below all remains the other center, suffusing primitive functionality with a haunting and unresolved enigma, neither happy nor sad, but beyond and above both, the mystery of the May morning, of bare chords, the archaic smile, Launcelot's night with Guinevere, in the country from which no stranger returns. Of course, this liberated energy ultimately dissolves the frames in which it is born, or formulates others of conscious responsibility, replacing the supermundane and non-temporal with the pride of man and earth. Though the dark sonorities of Susato's battle pavan like the distorted skull in the foreground of Holbein's Ambassadors, summons grandeur to the ennobling brunt of tragedy. This humanist shift occurs over a 400-year complex, of which we have now to define the stages. Consider the divide between 13th century Gothic in music ars antiqua and the late Gothic of the 14th century. In the cast left from the original Notre Dame St. Peter about 1220, the released force, the personality, is hierarchical, one with the transrational synthesis of faith. Even troubadour song and chivalric romance seem born outside time. Their logic is of selfless devotion, and it is to the crypt of silence that they return. Whereas in the so-called Boccaccio head from the Spanish chapel in Florence, mid-14th century, secular force and person stretch an already loosening ascetic creed. Town-dwarfing cathedrals yield to the civic claims of towered Italy and the trading North. Thomas Aquinas to the agitations of Wycliffe. Literature expands to Petrarch, Machaut, and Chaucer. Music to the exploratory modulations of Ars Nova. Yet all this vigor retains from the medieval some half-spaceless enigma of the earth pilgrimage. Between these style faces towers their 1300 boundary, the Divine Comedy, both Gothic synthesis and the liberating revolt of the new man. For Ars Antiqua we have heard Perotin with the Cathedral of Laon. Now with the Ars Nova Amen of the Tournée Gloria, let us range later Gothic from Erwin von Strasbourg's 1300 facade design through Italy and France and back to Ely Crossing with its octagon. This art quickens with ingenuity, while the pure chord fabric of music widens for the progressive inventions of Huckett. Like that Gloria, the Gothic dome of Ely is 25 years past what we have called the 1300 divide. But since in the continuous rebirth within Gothic, the same question will be posed by 1400, how to distinguish the 14th century from the 15th, which for all its medieval heritage we call early Renaissance, let us stake out the farthest advance of Italian Ars Nova and school of Giotto toward the natural harmonies to follow. Art offers an array of softening grace, from Giotto's tower, finished 50 years after his death, through the observation of Andrea and Nino Pisano, this Madonna del Latte, tender as Dante's stream of grace metaphor. No infant so quickly turns its face to the milk as I to dip eyes in that water. In fresco, the increasing immediacy ties this Altichiero to the 1390 miniatures of dei Grassi, while of recorded music, Landini's Gran Pianta agli Occhi most ripens toward the suavities of Dufay. Dei Grassi died a year after Landini. In his Visconti hours left, the intimate international style makes its furthest Italian and 14th century advance. But here we have coupled it with a comparable birth from the Turin miniatures, right, probably by Jan van Eyck, and some 30 years later, over the threshold of Chaucer's Pilgrims, when music too has ripened from the fifth-based poignance of Landini to Dufay's triadic counterpoint. In each art, early Renaissance defines itself. Within the old context of sacred myth and authority, the harmonious and observational, by quiet infiltration, have possessed the body of an ostensibly medieval universe. The revealed assumes the fabric of physicality, while the moods and details of earth find the consistency of their own ordering, though that order remains insular, not yet proclaimed of the whole. Yet in the rebirth ferment of the Florence of that time, the revolution of human power grows more absolute in theory and practice. As we face the frescoes on either side of the entrance to the Brancacci Chapel in the Church of the Carmine across the Arno, the linear thin continuance of Marcellino's Sin of Adam and Eve left, against the tragic might of the young Masaccio's Expulsion right. The conscious divide of 1425 piles itself on the style shift of 1400, quietly attested in Mussolino by the soft space and personality of international Gothic. But where the actual and embodied has made, in Masaccio, the breakthrough Alberti's treatise on painting ties to flesh, as long as breath remained to it, whoever spurned the flesh would spurn life itself. How can we call such an awakening insula? At its boldest, here Donatello's bust of Uzzano, about 1430, it must seem that the humanist transformation is complete. We have to remind ourselves that this force is cultivated in the shelter of an unchallenged faith frame, its daring permitted by ambiguity of values. So in Waller's Dialogue on Free Will, which Calvin and Leibniz would praise, reason heretically denies freedom, but within a fable of Tarquin and the Oracle, and over a return to patristic surrender, how is the pot to question the potter? We remain in the immediacy of rebirth, the secular as unvalidated antithesis in Catholic creed. Only by what would seem a backward step, the zeal of Reformation against that double talk, would we enter the late Renaissance phase of struggle, whereas the century of Donatello runs a sequence of naive delights. Earth and man not yet bound to self-responsibility for thought and act. In Gentile da Fabriano, in an isorhythmic Noel by Grenon, both about 1420, we wake to child renewal of the garden. The kings who kneel below have come through Tuscany